Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. This is the first of our series focused on providing support and resources for the sandwich generation. Today's topic is going to be Caregiving 101, Managing Burnout and Boundaries, and it's done in collaboration with MARU Center. A little bit of housekeeping. Today's session is going to be recorded, and everyone will get a copy of the slides along with a link to the recording. So if you miss anything, you can always go back and rewatch it or share with somebody else that you might think could benefit from the information. If you have any questions, you can use the Q&A module, which might be on your bottom toolbar or under More, and enter your questions there. We have time reserved at the end to address questions, and we'll also share those questions after the webinar is over as well, if you have to drop early, for example. So thank you. And with that, we're going to get started. My name is Drew Pack. I'm the Executive Director for the Korean American Community Foundation of San Francisco. And today's session is focused on the sandwich generation. And if you're wondering what that is, then the definition is on the next slide. These are adults who are simultaneously caring for aging parents and their own children and careers and their own needs. And they get basically squeezed between all of these different responsibilities. And for Korean Americans, this can be especially difficult because of cultural, demographic, immigration-related factors. And that might include what we're seeing today, which is a rapid increase in the number of Korean American seniors, because most of them might have immigrated in the 70s or the 90s. And there are numerous factors that make this especially difficult, including financial pressures and limited income, language and cultural barriers. There might be isolation or long distances between family members and people who can give care. There's also a really complex healthcare system and different resources and public benefits. All of this makes the Korean American version of the sandwich generation all the more difficult. So just some information to help you understand the scale of the challenge. There are over 2 million Korean Americans, and even though the median income might appear to be somewhat high, there's a large and growing portion that are actually considered low income or under-resourced. And when you look at the number of Korean American seniors, especially, that number has increased 69% in the last decade, which is almost twice the national average. And most of those people, almost 3/4, don't have English proficiency, and 40% qualify as low income. They might, and especially in the Bay Area here, they are rent burdened, and they have a lot of challenges in paying for basic needs. So, and this explains why so many Korean Americans suffer from mental health issues. So there's a large portion that don't really believe that mental health applies to them, or that it's something that they can address. If you look at the numbers on a map, you see that there are several significant concentrations of Korean Americans throughout the country. But even in these regions, like the Bay Area, you see almost 100,000 Korean Americans. The distances can make this feel a lot larger than it really is. And with the 2 million Korean Americans today, you actually have Koreans in all 50 states. So if you live outside of these major concentrations, it gets even more difficult to find culturally appropriate resources like medical professionals or social workers who understand and can communicate with you. So you're probably all familiar with the model minority myth, but again, there are numerous statistics that show that this is not true. The Korean American experience, there's a higher rate of poverty. Seniors are living rent burdened. There's a much higher rate of people who are suffering because they lack emotional and social services, and in the form of help, less than 34 cents out of every $100 that comes from private sources. These are foundations, charities, nonprofits. Less than 34 cents is going to Korean American programs and nonprofits. So the money is there. It's just not being focused on where it's needed. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to the MARU team. We have Yeri Son, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. And good evening and welcome. My name is Yeri Son. I'm Associate Director at MARU. And just to share a little bit about MARU, we were formerly known as Korean Community Center in the East Bay. We've been serving the Korean and other immigrant communities in the Bay Area since 1977. We're rooted in the belief that everyone deserves the access to the resources and support that they need to thrive. We walk along our communities through every stage of their journey, from safety net to wellness and to empowerment. Our programs are in three divisions. First is Safety Net, which includes social services, Bay Area Korean info line, and home delivered meals for low-income seniors. Second is Wellness, which includes mental health counseling, senior case management, support groups, and art-based healing. And last division is Empowerment, which includes community education and leadership development. Our mission is to improve the lives of diverse Asian communities through innovative solutions. And our new name, MARU, is a Korean word for gathering place where conversations start, ideas spark, and people share joy in the process. And this name captures our value of collaboration. We truly believe that this work has to be done through partnerships with other like-minded organizations. So I want to thank the Korean American Community Foundation, Drew and Amy here for their support in creating this space for the webinar today. And it is my utmost pleasure to introduce today's speakers. We're joined by Juyeon Chun and Dana Kim. They're bilingual wellness counselors and case managers at MARU, who are an integral part of our culturally responsive mental health care. So without further ado, I will pass it to Juyeon and Dana.
Thank you, Yeti. Hello, everyone. My name is Juyeon, and I use she, her pronouns. Just a little bit about myself. I have been working at MARU as a wellness counselor and a case manager for the last year and a half. And I moved to the US when I was 7 years old, and I am the eldest child. I am bilingual in Korean and English, and I primarily work with people who are of Asian immigrant backgrounds. My experiences include providing psychotherapy and counseling and case management in community mental health, academic, government, and hospital settings. And I've worked with many different clients throughout the years who are in a caregiver role while balancing various responsibilities in their lives. And this topic is important to me because I want to empower people who are of the sandwich generation with knowledge of how to better take care of themselves so that they can continue to provide quality care to their families while sustaining and improving their own well-being. Dana?
Thank you, Chian. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Kim, Kim Tana, and my pronouns are she, her. And I have been working at MARU for the past 2 years. Chian and I are both the firstborn daughter of Korean immigrants and born and raised in the US. And a fun fact is that we actually graduated from the same MSW program together at Smith College. And now we both hold roles as wellness counselor and ASWs, pursuing licensure and receiving training in clinical social work. So I work primarily across the lifespan, but I do have a focus on working with monolingual Korean elders and providing support for their caregivers. So it is such a huge privilege and pleasure to be here today. So here's a broad overview of what we will be covering today. So the first part of our webinar is mostly about understanding caregiving stress and burnout from a socio-emotional, and spiritual perspective. We will be reviewing the 4 dimensions of caregiving burnout and recognizing signs and symptoms and what they entail. And then Chuyeon will be covering the second half of the presentation, talking more about managing caregiver burnout, self-care, cultural expectations, and then as Drew mentioned, we will have time at the end for a Q&A. So, understanding caregiving stress and burnout. Before we dive into the material, I just wanted to take some time to discuss some key terms. So, caregiver stress. This is the day-to-day pressure of
Oh,
managing
Dana, I think
someone
we just
else's needs.
lost your sound.
Oh, sorry, what was that? Is my sound not working? Is it working now?
I can hear you.
Okay. So I'll start over. So just some key terms to make sure that we are all on the same page. Caregiver stress is the day-to-day pressure of managing someone else's needs on top of your own. So imagine the ongoing pressure itself. It's the mental load of caregiving, the interrupted sleep, the constant vigilance, and the energy that this requires. And caregiver burnout is different from caregiver stress in that it's the physical, emotional, and mental exhaustion from prolonged and unrelieved stress. So imagine your vital life battery running on empty for so long that your trusted methods of recharging, they just simply stop working and it's not enough. Stemming from caregiver stress and burnout can be compassion fatigue. And I'm sure y'all have all heard this term. This is the gradual erosion of empathy, energy, and caring that comes from prolonged exposure to another's pain and trauma. It's also known as the cost of caring. So, with compassion fatigue, imagine that you're so burnt out that you just stop caring. And in the context of caregiving, you're losing empathy and compassion and the quality of care might decrease. So, related to compassion fatigue is caregiver guilt, and this is that guilty feeling of never doing enough, even when you're doing a lot. And caregiver guilt is what can often prevent folks from seeking the relief that they so need. And as Drew mentioned at the beginning, this webinar is specifically catered for the sandwich generation. And I just want to point out that being a part of the sandwich generation is a structural condition that intensifies or amplifies all of these key terms that I just mentioned. So, differentiating between caregiver stress and burnout. So, with caregiver stress, imagine the ongoing pressure and the feeling of overwhelmed. And caregiver burnout is the next level of caregiver stress when these symptoms start to feel more chronic and degradation settles in on a physical, emotional, mental, and behavioral level. So, burnout is what happens when the stress goes unrelieved for a long period of time. The duration is also different. Caregiver stress is a lot shorter, and caregiver burnout tends to last longer from weeks to months to, in severe cases, maybe even years. And recharge, which in the case of stress, rest would still help you. In the case of burnout, your classic forms of rest, what you usually rely on, they just seem to stop working. And what does this feel like? With caregiver stress, it might feel like you're stretched thin, while burnout, it's like your vital life battery, it's running on empty, and there isn't a source internally that you feel like you can pull from. So imagine a depleted state. So you're not alone, and we wanted to share some numbers that might demonstrate how relevant this topic of caregiving burnout is. So nearly a third, or 29% of US caregivers are part of the sandwich generation, and 12% of these adults are multi-general caregivers who are caring for their children, also maybe caring for a spouse, and also providing unpaid care for one or more adults. In a separate study by Pew Research Center, 10% of US adults reported caring for a parent in the senior citizen age category. And very relevant for this presentation, among Asian American caregivers specifically, most turn out to be female and married, and about 2/3 manage a chronic health condition themselves. So just emphasizing again, if you're experiencing caregiver stress or caregiver burnout, just know that you're not alone, and there's probably many people in a similar situation. So why is this important to know? Why are we even holding this webinar today? So we invite you to recognize these symptoms for yourself, and instead of proceeding with shame, which can be a typical response, we invite you to empower yourself with the information that we are about to present to you in the next few slides. So, caregiver burnout, the 4 realms. So, as I mentioned, caregiver burnout is the accumulation of caregiver stress, guilt, and compassion fatigue, which begins to build up and manifest in these 4 different realms. So these 4 realms of caregiver burnout exist on an emotional, mental, physical, and behavioral level. And while they're all differentiated here, it's important to remember that these are all interconnected. So this is a holistic view of caregiver burnout. Emotional and mental is what's happening internally, while physical and behavioral is what's happening in your body and externally. So beginning with emotional, this is involving feelings and mood, and this is where caregiver burnout usually begins to show up first. And this is because your emotions usually begin to shift within you in subtle ways, or maybe big, before the physical symptoms and behavioral traits start to catch up. In the mental realm, is usually linked to sustained cortisol exposure. So cortisol is one of the major stress hormones, and there could be an impact on memory and decision-making capabilities. Moving to the bottom realm of the physical, connected to body and the energy that you have. These symptoms are usually noticed a bit later because caregivers are so used to monitoring someone else's body that they begin to neglect their own needs. And then we have behavioral. And behavioral can be viewed as an accumulation of what's happening internally and physically. And this is where burnout starts to become visible to those around you, and it can be viewed as an outward expression of what's happening in the other 3 realms that we mentioned. Before we dive deeper into the symptoms that exist in the 4 different realms I just touched upon, I just want to emphasize that you don't need to have all of these symptoms to be struggling. And maybe these points that we share with you could be a starting place for an inner dialogue with yourself and just a kind and compassionate curiosity of what's happening within you. So on this slide, we break down a bit more about the different symptoms that can show up in each of the 4 realms. And these are all interconnected. It's always from a holistic, interconnected view. On an emotional realm, maybe you're feeling an anxiety and dread every time you wake up in the morning. Perhaps you find your temper has a really short fuse and you're snapping at your kids over small things and feeling really guilty and bad about it afterwards. Perhaps there's a resentment when you're going through your caregiving tasks and wondering why me, or a persistent sadness that you're noticing. Or maybe you just feel completely numb and the emotional spectrum of feelings that you usually experience seem to just toned down to numbness at all. In the mental realm, you might find yourself struggling making decisions, big or small, trouble concentrating on things that you used to enjoy, like reading or listening to music or watching films. Maybe there's an element of forgetfulness, and this could be picking up your kids from school or preparing medication for the person that you're caring for. Maybe your mind is running 1,000 miles an hour and you can't find just even peace in your mind, which can feel like a lot. That would be rumination. Or perhaps you're so caught up with caregiving that anything else that involves mind power just seems to be pushed to the side. And so there's a cognitive narrowing happening there. In the physical realm, this can show up in a lot of different ways, but sleep disruption is usually a big indicator that there's stress or burnout there. A fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. You don't wake up in the morning feeling rested, even though you had seemingly adequate amount of hours to sleep. Appetite and weight changes, headaches, tensions in random parts of your body, digestion issues, and maybe you notice yourself getting sick a lot more frequently than you're used to. And then behaviorally, what the people around you notice. So maybe you're procrastinating on tasks and this is impacting how you're showing up at work. You're neglecting the self-care and you're relying on caffeine or alcohol or screens or anything else just to distract yourself of the pain inside. Maybe you're snapping or lashing out at loved ones and socially withdrawing from the support networks that could be helping you during this time. And as if the signs and symptoms weren't enough, there is a cost of ignoring the signs because we are not running on infinite reserves. Without replenishing yourself, there's going to be consequences. So the impact on the caregiver themselves, perhaps there's an increased risk of depression and anxiety. And with depression, just a quick description, it's having low mood and irritability, maybe difficulty sleeping, and just not caring about things that used to be pleasurable to you in your life. With anxiety, this could manifest as tension, a constant worry, feeling jittery all the time. And depression and anxiety, especially when they go unchecked for long periods of time and you're not receiving the support that you need, they can worsen and possibly lead to suicidal ideation in extreme cases. You could be at higher risk for physiological complications and chronic illnesses. So we're talking heart disease and weakened immune function. So once again, that's the physical realm of caregiver burnout that we mentioned. And this really, we're not just talking about discomfort here, but this could impact your health life trajectory down the road. Uh, Perhaps you could experience complete burnout where the caregiver role itself starts to feel impossible, and not even just a caregiver role, but other responsibilities in your life because you're juggling a lot as a part of the sandwich generation. And the two key terms that we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, caregiver guilt and compassion fatigue, where we literally stop caring for the loved one because we've reached our limit. And this also impacts your relationship with your loved one. You can find your patience wearing thinner over time, resentment, think of the emotional realm starting to build and reshaping the relationship even after the caregiving ends. So this is impacting you on an emotional, mental, behavioral, and physical realm. And this could also manifest as negative attitudes and shortness towards your loved one. And ironically, because you're not giving yourself time to rest, this can lead to lower quality of care and not higher. And of course, you don't exist in a vacuum. There are other important relationships in your life, and unfortunately, ignoring the signs will probably also impact those. So you can think of strain on marriage and partnership and child responsibilities, as well as withdrawal from friends and community, which would remove the exact support systems that would be of help and that you would so need during this time. So that concludes the first part of the presentation about understanding caregiver stress and burnout. And now Chion will go into the hopefully less depressing part about managing caregiving stress and burnout. So I'll pass the torch to you, Chion.
Thank you, Dana. Um, yeah, we covered a lot of information. So let's dive straight into talking about how to manage the caregiving stress and burnout. Um, I also wanted to go over a couple key terms so that we can be on the same page about some definitions. These are terms that I'm sure you have all heard of, but I just wanted to go over it. The first term is boundaries. So boundaries refers to clear limits on what you can give as a caregiver, so that you can sustain care for other people without losing yourself in the process. So, giving your time, energy, capacity, understanding what the boundaries are for you as a caregiver is crucial because this will help you to not burn out, like Dana had talked about previously, and still provide that quality of care that your loved ones need. Um, Respite care. This means short-term temporary care provided to someone who needs support so their primary caregiver can take a break, rest, or attend to personal needs. This one's pretty self-explanatory. So if the primary caregiver needs a break, respite care can be provided by other family members or friends, and or third-party caregivers. And last, self-care. Self-care means intentional actions to protect your own physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social well-being. Um, Self-care doesn't have to be fancy. It's just simple maintenance actions that can help you to keep going as a caregiver. I know this word is used a lot these days, but I just wanted to emphasize that um, it's, again, doesn't have to be anything fancy, but in a later slide, I will go over some ideas with you. So, how can we avoid the caregiving burnout and manage the stress? We can do that by setting boundaries. Um, Many people have been taught culturally and socially to give their time, energy, and resources whenever possible. Uh, However, there is less emphasis, and we don't talk about this enough, on how to refill that cup or to recharge that capacity that you have when it's depleted. So the following four topics that you see on the slide are ways in which you can recharge as a caregiver so that you can show up and care for your loved ones in a way that benefits both sides. As we talk about setting boundaries, I wanted to invite you to write down any ideas that may come into your mind. So whether or not you're caregiving currently, or maybe maybe you will later in the future, um, think of ways that you can show up for yourself, and for your own well-being. Next slide, please. So, feeling empowered. One of the biggest contributors to caregiver burnout is feeling powerless. Uh, while caregivers can't always change their loved one's illness or their circumstances, they can choose how they respond. Practicing acceptance of the situation and recognizing personal growth can help foster that resilience within you while you are caregiving. It's also important to maintain parts of your life outside of caregiving and focusing on what's within your control and celebrating the small victories and noticing the silver linings. Caregivers can also practice self-compassion by acknowledging their own efforts, reflecting on the positive impact that they make every day, and seek encouragement from supportive friends or family. Every care, no matter how small or big, can make a meaningful difference in a loved one's safety, comfort, and quality of life. I want to acknowledge that oftentimes caregivers may find themselves having this responsibility placed upon them, and they don't really have a say in the caregiving decision. Cultural factors such as filial piety, which I will go into depth a little bit later, and or the hierarchical system that many Asian cultures are rooted in can impact the caregiver's experiences. So it's really important to practice this boundary of empowering yourself every day. Asking for caregiving help. So caregiving doesn't have to be done alone. Um, Again, many of us have been directly or indirectly taught in our cultures that we shouldn't be a burden to other people and that family members or family matters should stay within the family. But one of the most important ways to prevent burnout is to ask for and accept support from other people. Caregivers can benefit from respite care, like it says in that list right there, sharing responsibilities with family members and clearly communicating their needs instead of expecting other people to know what kind of help is needed or when the help is needed. Building this support system through family, friends, and community resources and organizations in the community can provide practical and emotional relief for the caregivers. So, for example, make like very specific plans with your siblings or other caregivers down to the days and times of when they can share the responsibility or split the caregiving with you. Reach out to organizations in the community that you know of and seek that additional support from third party like caregivers. Accepting help and allowing others to contribute doesn't mean that you're losing control. It actually creates a more sustainable way to provide the compassionate care while also protecting the caregiver, like your own well-being. Set up regular check-ins with people that support you and trust that your family and friends will provide the help that you need in a way that will ease your burden. And last, give yourself a break. I know this is also, it can be difficult for a lot of people, but caregivers often prioritize their loved ones' needs while neglecting their own. But self-care and allowing yourself to just breathe and have rest is essential to providing long-term sustainable care. So taking regular breaks, maintaining relationships outside of your caregiving duties, expressing your emotions, telling people I'm struggling, I need help, I'm stressed. Those are just simple phrases that you can text or tell your family members or friends. That doesn't mean that you're any less or that you're weaker or anything like that. And also making time for meaningful activities can help reduce the stress that you might feel as a caregiver and restore your energy. And so all of these things can help you and allow you to better manage the demands of caregiving. Next slide. Okay, so the last topic, self-care. What does this look like for me as a caregiver? Maintaining your own health is an essential part of being an effective caregiver. So I have listed 7 things that you can add to your list of like how to practice self-care. Um, the first one, keeping up with your own health, so regular medical checkups. Um, Again, we tend to forget or push aside these doctor checkups at times, but um, be in regular contact with your doctors. Get holistic support, such as I listed like massage and acupuncture if that's available for you in your area. Um, and continuing on, like practicing relaxation, um, allowing yourself to practice meditation or grounding skills, um, using like YouTube. There's a lot of videos out there these days that are short as 5 minutes to 15, 30 minutes. Um, all of this can help with maintaining your emotional and spiritual well-being. Caregiver support groups. So connecting with caregiver support groups, whether it's locally or online, this can help provide you with more understanding and knowledge of how to better caregive to your loved ones. And this community allows you to have that sense of belonging and support and encouragement from other caregivers that may be in similar situations as you. Um, and towards the end of the presentation, I will talk with you a little bit more about some resources that are available online that you can easily access no matter where you live. Um, Moving on to exercise, eating well, and sleeping. I know this is talked about quite often, but it's just as crucial as the other three that I had just previously mentioned. Exercise, any kind of movement, helps lower your cortisol levels, those stress hormones. Um, it gives us that boost of your mood, going outside, going for walks, getting a little bit of gym time in, or yoga time, or um, yeah, anything to get your body moving will help. Eating well. Our gut and our digestive health, there's a lot of studies that show our gut is our second brain. The food that we consume actually impacts our mood significantly. And so eating a healthy, yummy, delicious meal for yourself throughout the day can immensely support your well-being. And then, of course, sleeping, adequate time that we give ourselves to sleep um, actually allows our bodies to heal quicker. Getting the 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep, sleeping well throughout the night can help boost your mood, your physical health, mental health, all of that. And then the last thing is practical care. So taking care of your own personal needs. Um, This kind of seems, it might seem counterproductive. I don't know if that's the right term, but you might think, what do you mean? Like doing more responsibilities for self-care? So, what I'm talking about when I say practical care is taking care of your own needs of like the chores or tasks that you've kind of been pushing aside. So, like cleaning your home, like vacuuming, going to the DMV, going to, I don't know, like paying your taxes, doing those little things that's been on the back of your mind can actually help a lot with lessening your burden or your stress. Um, and also just like meeting up with your friends, going out to get your favorite food or your favorite dessert. That's another way to improve your social well-being. And it goes into like the practical care aspect of self-care. So yes, next slide. Okay, finally, before we wrap up, I wanted to talk a little bit more about cultural factors and how this impacts the caregiver's experiences. Um, I want to acknowledge that not every Asian American immigrant family holds these beliefs to the same degree. just putting out there, and experiences obviously can vary based on ethnicity, immigration history, culturation, socioeconomic status, and family dynamics. So rather than viewing these cultural values that I'm going to talk about as barriers, it's it's often more accurate to discuss how they can be both protective factors and sources of stress for caregivers. So let's talk a little bit more about this. First value, first cultural factor is filial piety. So mm, in Chinese, I think it's xiao, and in Korean, it's hyo. So like when you use the term like hyonya or hyoja, filial piety refers to the deeply rooted cultural expectation that adult children should respect, honor, and care for their aging parents. And many Asian cultures teach that caring for parents is both a moral responsibility and a way to repay their parents for their sacrifices. We're all familiar with this. I'm sure we have all experienced this to some degree. Um, some of the protective factors of this of, of filial piety is this can create a strong sense of purpose and meaning in the family. It strengthens the family connection, and it's caregiving is often viewed as an act of love and respect rather than obligation. And it can provide caregivers with a sense of like pride and fulfillment that they're taking care of their family. On the other hand, some of the challenges that I want to acknowledge that caregivers might experience is that they may still feel that intense guilt when they experience burnout. Asking for help may feel like you're failing your parents. Adult children may continue to caregive beyond their physical and emotional limits. Placing parents in assisted living homes or nursing homes can be associated with feelings of shame and perceived abandonment. And there is a fear that hospital or any other facility staff will mistreat parents. So I want to validate and acknowledge that um, these are valid experiences, and we can talk about this within our own homes with your families, where caregivers can think and accept that, like, um, wanting help for myself as a caregiver and for my family doesn't mean that I'm loving my parents less. Or you can say to yourself, like, supporting myself and doing self-care can is another way that I'm honoring my parents because that will allow me to continue to care for them. So these are just things to think about as a caregiver. Um, Multi-general differences in values. So I kind of briefly touched upon hierarchical like family culture. Um, Elders are respected. Parents often maintain authority throughout adulthood. Younger family members are expected to defer to older relatives for advice or wisdom, and decision making may be still centered around the oldest family member. And some of the challenges that adult children may experience is like not being able to set boundaries or questioning parents' decisions is disrespectful, or simply talking about like medical care or dementia, mental health, like it's taboo to talk about it and you're so nervous about it. Um, so, ways that you can talk with your parents about this in a way that's not combative or conflicting is you can acknowledge and say, you know, it's okay that I can experience um I can express concerns to my parents and also still respect them, and we can meet in the middle together. Having these difficult conversations doesn't mean that I'm being disrespectful. All I want is for you to be safe and healthy. Um, and sometimes honoring our elders means helping them stay to stay safe. So those are some things to talk about and discuss and bring up with your family members and to the loved ones that you're caring for. I can go on about, collectivistic and individual mindsets, and this ties into the Western and Eastern cultural ideologies. Um, uh, in the US, predominantly individualistic mindsets include independence, self-care, personal goal, personal boundaries, autonomy, whereas collectivistic cultures oftentimes think about family needs come before personal needs. Success and hardship is shared in the family. Decisions are made with the family in mind instead of just the individual. Um, so again, allowing yourself to think about this as a caregiver, you can say healthy caregiving includes caring for both caregiver, myself, and the parent. Interdependence can include accepting support from other people. Taking care of yourself doesn't mean that you're abandoning your family. So, allowing yourself to have that little bit of grace and again, communicating this with your parents can open up talking points in your conversations with your parents and your siblings and families um, when conversations are already difficult to begin with. Yeah. Um, okay, and then mental health stigma, gender expectations, language barriers. I won't go into too much depth of this, but um, these are also cultural factors that caregivers may face quite frequently. Um, whether it's about traditional roles of like women taking care more than men, or um, there's a lot of stigma behind mental health in the Asian culture still, and immigration and language barriers. So, um, talking with social services, hospitals, insurance companies, uh, assisted living facilities. There's multiple layers of communication that has to go through, especially as you, the adult child, like the caregiver, you might have to translate for various organizations to your parents. You have to then translate what your parents' wishes are and clearly be able to like express that to the other organizations that you're working with. Those are all valid stressors and um, like real experiences that you will face as a caregiver. And it's really important, again, for you to have the adequate support system, whether it's using translation services or having support from family and friends to be able to correctly and accurately express what the family's desires are, and also taking care of your own needs as the caregiver. Um, okay. So I know I covered a lot today, and I know we covered a lot in this webinar. So we wanted to share this slide with you to further help you receive more information. I have provided a couple resources, at least for within the state of California, for you to find support, additional support as a caregiver, and there are support groups out there that you can access. So when you go on Google, you can literally just type in caregiver support near me, and a lot of links will come up. And these are just four that are the official ones that I found through the government websites. And then citations of all the information and the articles that we've used to compile this presentation for you today. So you can refer to these links for further detail. And yeah, we will open up for questions.
Thank you for that. There was a few questions in. I think Drew has already answered. It was regarding caregiver support group list. We don't have the one that we created in-house, but there's actually links that June has shared, which will be in the slide. And I think some of them actually has links to finding support group near you, or signing up to actually receive or find resources that's actually more tailored for you and the region that you're in. And I wanted to also bring up the questions that was actually submitted to us in prior. So the first question that we have is, what are some tips for caregivers who live far away, or in different cities or even different states?
I can add to that. So, kind of going back to the resources that I had listed on the last slide, um, there's a lot of caregiver support groups that are out there within your local region, as well as online groups. And um, it may feel overwhelming, especially if your loved ones are living farther away, whether it's in a different city or even in a different state. But taking things one step at a time, reaching out to local organizations, any like family members that live nearby the loved one that needs the caregiving, reach out to them and coordinate certain like schedules and um, being able to work together to make sure that they make it to their medical appointments or um, yeah, whatever resources that they may need. Um, there are organizations such as IHSS or other forms of in-person, in-home caregiving structures that are put in place by the government. Um, yeah, I don't know, Dana, are there anything else that you can think of?
Um, I think you pretty much covered it, Jian.
All right, thank you for that. The next question is, oh, I think I've heard different versions of this actually story too. My father refused to stop driving. How can I address the situation? It's the next question.
Yes, thank you, Yeti. I could touch on this one. So this question really goes back to what Chuyeon shared about navigating difficult conversations with loved ones. And so, yes, this is a big issue. Like dad is a safety hazard or posing as a safety hazard on the road, and at the same time he is refusing to stop driving. So what could be a potential solution is more grounded in a harm reduction approach, which takes into account compassion and understanding about where your father is coming from. This could look like a conversation asking him, what exactly are you afraid of losing? Because guaranteed there's something deeper than just the driving there. There's that sense of autonomy, identity, and the fear of being a burden that could be a huge part of it. And so then you can go into continuing to have these smaller conversations, which can be more fruitful for someone who might be defensive than a one-off conversation, and reducing the risks while this longer conversation continues. So, reducing the risk could look like maybe collaborating with dad so that y'all agree on daytime only or just familiar routes only driving. Or this could be coming to agreement to avoid freeways, rush hour, or bad weather conditions. Maybe you could incorporate tools like a GPS or check-in system rather than a whole cutoff. And then as the convo continues, perhaps you can open the door to collaborating about alternatives like ride shares, senior transport services. There's East Bay Paratransit in the Bay Area, which has been a huge, like a very invaluable resource for our senior clients. And an emphasis on what are you gaining in the situation? A driver versus what are you losing? And then just to add to that, of course, there are situations when your father or whoever might be posing a real danger, and it's just like you don't have the luxury of time to have these conversations. You could also escalate the issue by filing an anonymous report to the DMV, which would trigger a mandatory retest. And um, this is a reality in many states, including California.
Thank you for answering that, Dana. It seems like it's the two kind of two-prong approach of having compassion and understanding where the father's coming from, but also really communicating the concerns and risks around it and sort of meeting halfway there. The next question is, I think there was actually a good portion of a presentation that was covering like and touching upon cultural nuances. So the next question is about like my spouse is not Korean, so how can I have them understand my responsibilities and commitment to the family?
Mm, that is a great question. And I think, again, it comes back to helping your spouse see the value that you put on like your family and culturally, um, helping them understand that this is not the way it is, but it's more of like, yeah, a lot, like communicate with them and help them see like what is meaningful and valuable for you and how they can support you so that you can feel like you're not alone in this task. Um, and just having that clear communication between you both, I think is really important. And mm, yeah, Dana, is there anything else that you want to add?
Yes, this is a really relevant question, especially and it can pose like a huge like friction point in families where filial expectations are shaped by culture, but marriage might not necessarily be. So, as we mentioned with the conversation with the father in driving, this could be also just an invitation to more dialogue rather than asking your partner just to accept it. So, inviting your spouse or partner into the why. So, sharing specific stories or memories that shaped your sense of like filial piety and duty towards your parents. Um, and then explaining what it would feel like and how it would impact you in a real way if you didn't show up in the way that you felt compelled to. So that's a really different approach of like, you need to understand this. Why aren't you understanding this? Versus like, hey, like, let's talk more about what this means to me, how this and how I grew up with this and how it's showing up now in this really pivotal time in my life with caregiving.
Thank you for sharing that. So the communication, open communication, and continuous communication seems to be one of the key words. We have a couple more questions that came in, so I'm going to read this. I am planning to talk about advanced care planning with my parents soon. Could you share if you have any experience in the past or how Korean American parents will react to this topic?
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really fragile conversation to have. Um, I don't have too many experiences of doing advanced healthcare planning with caregivers or some of my clients, but I have used the Five Wishes packet. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that, but it's something similar to Advanced Healthcare Directive. Um, I think my biggest advice is to take it little bits at a time because it can feel very overwhelming to talk and have this discussion with your parents about end of life planning. And there's a lot of emotionally charged like topics and conversations that will happen. And so take care of yourself again as a caretaker, caregiver, and doing one thing, one topic at a time, and taking it at their pace, I think would be helpful in that situation.
Yes, I just also want to add that typically with older, actually, I shouldn't assume this is an older Asian adult, but there might be a preference for advanced care planning to be initiated by a physician rather than a family member. So that could be something to note and maybe consult with the doctor beforehand. And it could also be fruitful to involve close family members in the process who are valued. So the conversation could be framed as like the doctor recommended we talk about this, or have the conversation alongside a doctor's visit rather than just like raising it cold turkey at home. Like that could feel a lot less imposing and more like it's a part of just normal routine medical care.
Thank you for sharing. I think it is, I just want to be mindful of the time. So it is 8:01. So I'm going to read the very last question. Sorry if there's more questions on the way. We did leave our contact info. Please reach us to us. How would you start a conversation if you disagree the way one of your family members was providing care and that family member is the main provider?
I could jump in really quick for this one. I think any approach rooted in understanding and compassion, like it's hard to go wrong with that. So starting by acknowledging how much the caregiver is caring and providing the support that their loved one needs before going into the disagreement itself, and providing an empathetic, like listening ear to really understand where the other caregiver is coming from is how I would start this conversation.
You both.
And then one more thing, also framing the issue as like it's not me versus you, but it's us versus this issue. So how can we work together to make sure that ultimately our loved one is getting like the best care and support that they can get in this situation?
I think those are all the questions that we received. Thank you everyone for joining us. And here's our contact info. As Drew mentioned, we will be sharing our slides. So you'll have this contact info as in addition to all of the points on the slide that we shared. And Drew, any last words before we close it out?
No, thank you to everyone who joined us today and for our speakers for sharing so much great information.
Um, Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy your evening.
Thank you.